Let me tell you a story about a young man's struggles and how an elder's wisdom taught him the power of choice and inner peace. Deep within an ancient forest, where the trees stood tall and ancient, their gnarled branches reaching toward the heavens, there was a peaceful stillness that seemed to slow time itself. The forest was alive with the hum of nature, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds returning to their nests, and the gentle murmur of a creek winding through the moss-covered rocks. The air was cool but not harsh, carrying the scent of earth and pine, and the sky overhead was painted with the fiery colors of a setting sun, hues of amber, pink, and violet blended into the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the forest floor. As the sun disappeared behind the trees, the world seemed to hold its breath, and the first stars began to twinkle high above. The air grew crisp, and the sounds of the forest settled into a quieter, more peaceful rhythm. In the heart of this magical place, a fire crackled in a small clearing, its warm glow a beacon against the encroaching darkness. The flames leaped and danced, their bright orange and red hues casting flickering shadows on the ground. Sitting beside the fire, wrapped in a thick, weathered cloak, was an old man, known to all who lived in the forest as the keeper of stories. His face, lined with the marks of time, bore a gentle smile that hinted at the deep well of wisdom he had accumulated over the years. His long silver hair was tied back neatly, and his eyes, a piercing shade of gray, held the quiet strength of someone who had witnessed countless seasons pass. Though his body was frail with age, there was a calmness and power in his presence, as if he were an inseparable part of the very land he inhabited. He was a living bridge between the past and the present, always ready to share the lessons he had learned through the years. The fire he tended to crackled and popped, sending sparks into the cool night air. Around him, the forest seemed to come alive in the fading light. The stars above, now fully visible, twinkled like silent companions, their presence a reminder of the vastness of the universe. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying with it the ancient songs of the forest. It was in this quiet, sacred space that the young boy, burdened by the heaviness of his emotions, had come to seek guidance. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the ancient forest in hues of deep blue and violet. Shadows stretched long across the clearing, blending into the dense embrace of trees, their silhouettes swaying gently in the evening breeze. The forest hummed with life, the rustling of leaves, the faint chirp of crickets, and the occasional hoot of an owl. Yet amidst this serene backdrop, a young boy walked slowly, his steps hesitant and his gaze fixed on the ground before him. The fire's flickering glow reached out like an invitation, casting warm light against the old man's seated figure. The keeper of stories sat cross-legged on a worn blanket, his posture steady and unshaken, as though rooted to the very earth beneath him. The boy paused at the edge of the clearing, clutching his arms around his chest. For a moment, he considered turning back, retreating into the dark comfort of the forest. But the heaviness in his chest urged him forward, a need for answers pulling him closer to the old man.
"Come, child,"
the keeper said softly, without even turning his head. His voice, like the forest itself, carried a calm assurance. The boy hesitated before taking a few uncertain steps toward the fire, its warmth washing over him as he lowered himself onto the ground. His small figure looked even smaller beside the old man, his face illuminated by the firelight, which danced in his wide, troubled eyes. He sat in silence for a moment, watching the flames leap and flicker, unsure how to begin.
"Grandfather,"
he said at last, his voice barely above a whisper. The old man turned his head toward him, his gaze patient and kind, as though he had all the time in the world. The boy drew in a shaky breath and began to speak, his words tumbling out as though they had been waiting for this moment.
"Something's wrong inside me. It feels like there are two wolves fighting in my heart."
His small hands tightened into fists on his knees.
One of them is angry and bitter. It's full of jealousy, hate, and bad thoughts. The other one is different. It's kind and hopeful, full of love and good things.
The boy's words faltered, and he glanced up at the old man, searching his weathered face for reassurance.
"But they're always fighting, Grandfather. Always. And I don't know which one will win."
The old man remained quiet, his face thoughtful as he stirred the fire with a long stick, sending a spray of sparks into the night sky. His silence was heavy, but not oppressive. It gave space for the boy's words to linger, to echo in the stillness of the forest. The boy lowered his gaze, staring at the ground as if ashamed of the turmoil he had revealed.
"I'm scared,"
he admitted after a long pause, his voice breaking.
"What if the bad wolf is stronger? What if it wins? I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be angry and mean, but sometimes I can't help it."
Tears welled up in the boy's eyes, but he quickly wiped them away with the sleeve of his tunic. He didn't want to cry, not in front of the keeper, not when he was supposed to be strong. But the weight of his emotions was too much, and the tears came anyway, silently trailing down his cheeks. The old man finally spoke, his voice low and steady, like the gentle flow of a stream.
"This battle you speak of, child, is one that goes on in every heart, not just yours."
The boy looked up, startled.
"In every heart?"
"Yes,
The keeper said, nodding slowly.
even in mine. These wolves you describe, they live inside all of us. They are always there, always wrestling for control."
He gestured toward the fire, the flames reflecting in his wise, knowing eyes.
It is a part of being human. But do you know what determines which wolf will win?
The boy shook his head, his brows furrowed in confusion.
"No, Grandfather, I don't."
The old man leaned forward, his gaze piercing yet warm.
It is the wolf you feed, child.
He said simply.
"The wolf I feed?"
The boy repeated, tilting his head in puzzlement.
Yes,
The old man said, leaning back and gesturing to the forest around them.
if you feed the wolf of anger, jealousy, and bitterness, if you give it your thoughts, your energy, and your attention, it will grow stronger. It will dominate your heart, leaving no room for the other wolf to thrive.
The boy's eyes widened as he listened, the old man's words sinking in like water into parched soil.
But
The keeper continued, his voice softer now.
If you feed the wolf of love and compassion, if you nurture it with kindness, understanding, and positive actions, it will flourish. It will drive out the darkness and fill your heart with light.
The boy sat in silence, his gaze fixed on the fire. His mind churned with the old man's words, turning them over and over like stones in a stream.
I didn't know I could choose.
He said at last, his voice quiet but steady. The old man smiled, a gentle and reassuring curve of his lips.
We always have a choice, child. Even in the darkest moments, we can choose which wolf to feed.
The boy nodded slowly, the fear and confusion in his eyes beginning to fade, replaced by a glimmer of hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt a sense of control, a sense that he could shape the battle within him, not by fighting, but by choosing. And in that moment, under the ancient trees and the starry sky, he began to understand that the power to find peace lay within his own heart. The fire crackled softly, its golden light casting dancing shadows against the ancient trees. The boy sat cross-legged on the forest floor, leaning forward, as though the old man's words held the key to unlocking a great mystery within him. The warmth of the flames touched his face, but it was the old man's steady voice that truly warmed his heart.
The wolves you speak of,
The old man began, his tone gentle but firm.
are not just in your heart. They live in every heart. They are the essence of human nature, two forces pulling at us, urging us in opposite directions. Their strength depends on us and the choices we make each day.
The boy furrowed his brow, unsure of what the old man meant.
But, grandfather,
He said, his voice tinged with both curiosity and frustration.
I don't understand. How do I stop the dark wolf? It feels so strong, like it's already won.
The old man chuckled softly, a sound like the rustle of leaves in the wind.
Ah, child,
He said,
you do not stop the dark wolf by fighting it. You stop it by starving it.
He leaned forward and picked up a small twig, tossing it onto the fire. The flames leaped up, consuming the twig in an instant.
The wolves are like this fire.
The old man explained, gesturing toward the flames.
They need fuel to survive. If you feed them, they grow strong. If you deny them, they weaken and fade. The dark wolf thrives on your anger, jealousy, and bitterness. Each time you hold on to a grudge or let resentment fester in your heart, you are feeding it. And with every bite it takes, it grows stronger until it feels as though it will consume you.
The boy stared into the fire, mesmerized by the way it devoured the twig. He thought about the moments when anger had burned inside him, hot and consuming, making him lash out at others or retreat into silence. He could see now how those moments had given power to the dark wolf, allowing it to grow.
and the light wolf?
He asked hesitantly, afraid of the answer but desperate to know. The old man's eyes softened, and a gentle smile spread across his face.
The light wolf, my boy, feeds on love, kindness, and compassion. It grows stronger each time you forgive someone, even when it's hard. It flourishes when you show understanding, when you choose to help rather than hurt, when you think good thoughts about yourself and others. The light wolf is nurtured by every act of kindness, no matter how small.
The boy sat back, his mind racing. He remembered the times he had comforted a friend or shared a laugh with someone he cared about. He thought of the small acts of kindness he had witnessed. His mother sewing a blanket for an elder. His father sharing food with a neighbor in need. Those moments had felt warm and bright, like the glow of the fire before him.
But what if I've already fed the dark wolf too much?
The boy asked, his voice trembling.
What if it's already too strong? Can the light wolf ever catch up?
The old man reached out and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, his touch firm but comforting.
It is never too late,
he said, his voice filled with quiet certainty.
The light wolf is always there, waiting. Even if it feels small and weak now, it only needs your attention to grow. Every time you choose love over hate, understanding over judgment, you take power away from the dark wolf and give it to the light. Over time, the balance will shift. The dark wolf will shrink, and the light wolf will shine brighter than ever.
The boy's heart swelled with a mix of hope and determination. He could see the wolves clearly now, not as enemies locked in eternal combat, but as parts of himself, parts he could choose to nurture or starve. The dark wolf no longer seemed invincible, and the light wolf no longer seemed distant. The old man leaned back, his gaze returning to the fire.
Life is not about banishing the dark wolf, child. It will always be there, just as the night follows the day. But you have the power to decide which wolf will lead your heart. Feed the light wolf with your thoughts, your actions, and your love, and it will guide you toward peace and happiness.
The boy sat in silence, the crackling of the fire and the distant rustle of leaves, the only sounds in the night. He felt a sense of clarity he had never known before. The battle within him was not a war to be won through force or strength. It was a choice, a daily, moment-by-moment choice to feed the wolf that would bring light into his life. In the days that followed the boy's conversation with the old man, he couldn't stop thinking about the wolves. Their presence within him felt more real than ever, and he began to notice moments when the dark wolf stirred, times when anger flared, jealousy bubbled, or bitterness crept in. But now, instead of letting those feelings take over, he paused and reflected.
Which wolf am I feeding?
He would ask himself. The first test of his resolve came sooner than he expected. His younger sister accidentally spilled water on a drawing he had worked on for hours. The dark wolf's growl echoed in his heart as frustration surged, and he felt the urge to shout. But then he remembered the old man's words and took a deep breath. He looked at his sister's tear-filled eyes and saw her guilt and fear. Gently, he knelt beside her, smiled, and said,
It's okay. I can draw another one.
Her face lit up with relief, and in that moment, the light wolf stirred, its strength growing with his act of kindness. Soon, the boy found more opportunities to practice feeding the light wolf. One afternoon, he overheard two boys laughing about his struggles to catch fish. His cheeks burned with embarrassment, and the dark wolf nudged him to lash out, to mock them back. But instead, he decided to ask for their help.
You seem really good at fishing.
He said.
Can you teach me?
The boys were surprised but agreed, and soon the three of them were laughing together by the riverbank. The boy not only caught more fish, but also gained 2 new friends. In another instance, he saw his neighbor struggling to carry a heavy load of firewood. The boy's first instinct was to keep walking. It wasn't his responsibility, after all. But then he thought of the light wolf. He turned back, ran to the neighbor, and offered to help. Together they carried the wood, and the neighbor thanked him with a warmth that made the boy's heart feel lighter. Every day was filled with choices, some big and some small. When envy whispered in his ear as he saw another boy showing off a finely made bow, he chose to compliment it instead of feeling resentful. When he felt frustrated during a difficult task, he reminded himself to take a deep breath and keep trying. With each act of kindness, patience, and understanding, he felt the light wolf's presence grow stronger, filling him with a sense of peace he had never known before. The transformation wasn't always easy. There were moments when the dark wolf roared, tempting him to give in to anger or jealousy. One evening, after a particularly frustrating day, he found himself snapping at his mother over something trivial. As soon as the words left his mouth, he regretted them. He apologized, and his mother's forgiving smile reminded him that even when he faltered, he could always choose to feed the light wolf again. The boy began to notice not just changes within himself, but also in the way others treated him. His friends sought him out more often, drawn to his kindness and calm demeanor. His sister laughed more around him, no longer afraid of his temper. Even the elders in the village began to comment on his growing maturity, recognizing the peace that radiated from him. One evening, as the boy sat by the same fire where the old man had first told him the story, he reflected on how far he had come. He realized that the battle between the 2 wolves would never truly end. There would always be moments of anger, jealousy, or bitterness trying to take root. But he no longer felt overwhelmed by those feelings. He understood now that they were simply opportunities to make a choice, to strengthen the light wolf and diminish the dark. The old man watched him from across the flames, a knowing smile on his face.
You've grown, child,
He said.
I can see the light wolf shining in you.
The boy smiled back, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the wisdom he had received. He knew that the journey wasn't over, but he was no longer afraid. He carried the lesson of the wolves in his heart, a guiding light that would help him navigate life's challenges. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled above, the boy made a silent vow to feed the light wolf with every thought, every action, every moment of his life. He understood now that the strength of the light wolf didn't just benefit him, it brought warmth and light to those around him, creating ripples of kindness and peace.